Okay, so we're back. We're back in business, looking at another installment in the Middot HaYom, taking a look at another of the iterations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Anhaga, how we are meant to grow and thrive as human beings, or perhaps more appropriately, human becomings, in following the trajectory that the Torah has laid out for us in the instructions for living, and as Kabbalistically are found rooted in the Midos and the Sefiros that Hashem expresses His Anhaga in, which we explore every day during the Sefirat HaOmer. And today we're looking at the 27th Midah, which is the concept of Yesod, ShebeNetzach. And as what we've been seeing and experiencing throughout Netzach, the idea of fighting for value and standing for those things and recognizing Hashem as having or possessing or expressing an undying, victorious streak for Chok HaTov L'Hativ, for the ultimate fulfillment of the purposes of creation, and trying to embody that within ourselves. We arrive at the sixth Midah in the process of Netzach, which deals with the concept of Yesod. So we've already seen a couple iterations of Yesod. Yesod implies integrity. The way that the Kabbalistic Sfarim described it was a hiskashrus, a connection and delivery of all of the previous midos which had come before, allowing full unadulterated delivery of the previous midos into the world of Malchus, which is where they're going to be manifest and be marveh kvod shemayim thereby. So what would the notion of Yesod have to do with Netzach? So again, we've already seen that it means that there's got to be full, unadulterated, undiluted expression. So if we're dealing with that in the concept of Netzach, in the concept of fighting for values, what that would mean is, I think similarly to the way that it's expressed in the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos, where we have the concept of Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin libatel mimena, that we have an obligation to stay true to the battle and to never stop. And that what we should be doing should be based on that foundation of this fight is worth fighting come hell or high water. So the first step I think of Yesod is that whether you are going to be able to complete the battle or not, you don't step away from the battle zone simply because it's unfinishable by one person alone. Yesod means that if I'm going to live with integrity, with commitment to that value, to that fight, then it means that I may have to pass along the torch, but whatever is within my ability to act upon, I find that is my calling to actually act upon it and to take it upon oneself. And I think that this is probably expressed in another Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says that in Limadat Torah harbe, that if a person learns tremendous amounts of Torah, al tachzik tov al atzmacha, so don't give yourself any credit, ki lekach notzarta, because that's what you were created for. And the whole notion that you think you're special because you're taking arms up in this fight. I mean, if every single soldier was patting themselves on the back, oh, I just won the war for the whole army. I mean, don't kid yourself. You're part of a massive system. Now, of course, you need to give your life for this. You need to be ein Torah niknet ela b'misha meimis atzma b'leha. But view yourself as the channel for the Netzach. Don't view yourself as the Netzach itself. Of course, you embody it within yourself, but that's only in as much as you are a direct channel for the expression of that Netzach in the world. So you're created for that purpose. It's your calling to fight the fight for goodness, for truth in the world, to bring the world into perfection. That's what you're here for. So of course, it's important to credit oneself, but not credit oneself as the source of creation, right? You credit yourself as actualizing your potential in being the greatest darn warrior that you can be in this fight for eternal value. And I think that another expression of this is how the Rambam paskins in Hilchos Tshuva, towards the close of Hilchos Tshuva in the 10th chapter, how a person who's truly being oved in the highest level possible, who's serving Hashem, so to speak, and involved in the service of Torah for the ideal purpose, so he describes that as being an oved me'ahava, someone who's serving out of love, who's involved in the service out of love. And the way that the Rambam describes this, he says that they're not involved in the service to get rewards in this world. They're not doing it to get honor. They're not looking to avoid pain or harm, afflicted to themselves. The Rambam's language is Ela osa emet mipnei shehu emet. You're doing truth because it is truth. V'sof hatova lavo biglala. And then obviously, as a result of being involved in truth, goodness ends up coming out as a result of it. And obviously, this whole chapter in Mishnah Torah requires a lot of iyun on every word. But I think just if we're looking at the general idea that he's expressing, he's saying that a life of a tzaddik, a person who's involved in avoda in the ideal manner, is not doing truth because truth fulfills me. He's not involved in the fight for value because I've now discovered what justifies my life. You're doing truth because it's truth. You find yourself being involved in activities that open yourself to being a conduit for reality to express. Does that mean that your personal slice of reality is now justified? Of course. That's what it means to participate in reality. Now your slice of life, kind of emerges into a higher calling, becomes part of a larger platform of existence. You're qualitatively more. But that's not why you're doing it. You're involved in reality because it's reality, for God's sake. What else would you want to be involved in? Illusion? So Yesod ShebeNetzach says that when you're fighting for value, take it down to the foundation. What's it about? Is it about you being involved in the value, or is it about you doing whatever you can for the sake of value itself, which is in the highest order value, reality, existence, being. That's what the tzaddik fights for. That's what a person involved in a loving relationship with existence expresses his activity within. It's osa emes mipnei shehu emes. Now, of course, in being involved in that path, as the Rambam says, goodness is going to come upon you as a result of that. But that's not your orientation towards the avoda that you have. And so this is why I think the Middot is an unbelievable Middot Tanchuma, very powerful language, which we've seen one half of this before, but I'm taking us back to the previous half, which I had not shared with all of you the last time that we looked at this, where the Middot says an astounding thing in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the author of the Talmud Yerushalmi, where the pasuk says, "Ushmarta va'asisa osam," you should guard them and perform them, talking about the mitzvos. And Rabbi Yochanan says, "Kol ha'ose mitzvah achas la'amito," anyone who performs one mitzvah for its truth, right? Again, this has got to be the language that the Rambam is borrowing from. He's doing a mitzvah la'amito, right? That's the Rambam's language. Osa emes mipnei shehu emes. You're doing a mitzvah for its reality, for her own existence, for the existence of the mitzvah. Says the Medrash, says Rabbi Yochanan, Ma'ale alav akasuv ki'ilu hi nesuna mehar Sinai. The Torah considers it as if they themselves gave it from Har Sinai. You're God, you were on Har Sinai giving the Torah. That's what it means when you're doing a mitzvah. It's unbelievable. And then it goes on, it says, well, what does it mean, va'asisem osam? So it continues and says, Kol ha'mekayim es haTorah va'asa osa le'amito. Anyone who upholds the Torah, sustains the Torah, and performs it in its truth, to its reality, ki'ilu hu tikna unasana mehar Sinai. It's like you formulated the Torah and gave it at Sinai. You're God now. Welcome to being the master of the universe. What's going on over here? I think this has got to be at least one of the sources that the Rambam is drawing upon. What it means to be involved in a mitzvah is that you are a direct channel from those first moments that God's voice echoed out, emanating from Har Sinai, and that everyone heard and saw the voice. You become that voice when you are a channel for that value. I mean, that's got to be what the Midrash is saying. By virtue of you being involved in a mitzvah for the sake of its own reality, you are an expression of God in this world. You are expressing that very initial potential that God's desire to create, to share His instructions for living with us. You become that delivery mechanism. You are now God on Sinai, says the Midrash. Your mitzvos are as if you wrote the mitzvos. You authored it. Great book, by the way. You are the one who compiled the Torah. It's an unbelievable assertion for Rabbi Yochanan to be making. This is what it means to be involved in Yesod ShebeNetzach. And so I think another component of this is the famous Gemara in Sefirat HaOmer, which is that if you are going to be delivering value, it has got to be that what comes out in your expressions, in your actions, is a direct expression of those values that you have. I mean, that's what it means. If you're delivering those values, if you are a direct channel for Hashem's, so to speak, Netzach, to come out into the world, it must mean that it's undiluted from beginning to end. And so we have an astounding assertion in the Gemara. The Gemara in Yuma Ayin Beis Amud Beis says that we learn from a juxtaposition or a drasha from the description of the Aron, right, the Holy Ark, where it says Mibayit u'michutz tetzapenu, that both the inside and the outside need to be coated with gold. That Rava tells us, Kol Talmud Chacham she'ein tocho kavaro, any Talmud Chacham whose insides are not like his outside, eino Talmid Chacham. You're not a Talmud Chacham, you're not a Torah scholar. You call that being a student of wisdom? How is it that there's no synthesis, there's no integration between who you are on the inside and what's coming out on the outside? That can't be the case if you are truly functioning as a channel for delivering the Netzach of Torah to the world. As we saw, Shmuel Beis, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. The Eternal One of Israel doesn't lie. There's no fabrication, there's no falsehood. If you are expressing something which isn't inside or on the inverse, something inside within you is not being adequately expressed, that's not a Talmud Chacham. Sorry to say. You might be working on your way there. You may be B'nei Talmid Chachamim, you're a student of wisdom, you're getting there. But Talmud Chacham, you're not. Right, donkey carrying books, like the Gemara says about Rav Nachman, where they came to him and they said, oh, there's a great Talmud Chacham in the Beis Medrash. We want to give him a great eulogy. So Rav Nachman says, what should I say? The bookshelf in the Beis Medrash broke? What exactly am I supposed to say about him? Yeah, it's a great bookshelf. Oh, it's really, really special. There's nothing there. He didn't embody the values in those books. He was a carrier. He was a heichi timtza for those books. That's not what it means to live as Yesod. Now, I think that an interesting inverse of this idea is what the Gemara in Sota mentions, meaning the opposite side. You might know that every one of the Midos has a tzad tuma for it as well. And I think that one of the meaning, what that means is, kind of in simple English, is a way in which the Midah could be misapplied, kind of like the evil twin of the Midah. So in other words, the exact opposite of living with integrity would be like the Gemara that we just saw, Talmud Chacham she'ein tocho kavaro. But I think another side of this is that the Gemara in Sota says, where the Gemara says in a crazy assertion, classic Chazal, that they just drop a sentence and walk away, and all the Amoraim have to scramble to figure out what they're talking about. So the Gemara comes off and says, Tanayim mevale olam. Tanayim, they destroy the world. They wear out the fabric of the universe. Those Tanayim, they destroy everything. So the Gemara jumps in and they're like, what? Mevale olam? What does that mean? They wear out the universe? So Ravina comes to the rescue. And he says, Amar Ravina, shemorin halacha mitoch mishnasan. They paskin their halacha straight out of the Mishnah. Meaning to say, as Rashi explains, is that they don't take it to the final conclusion. So sometimes there are different opinions that they haven't taken into consideration. Or sometimes they don't know the Ta'amei HaMishnayos, right? They don't know the Svaros that went into it. So they aren't able to draw through the original idea to its ultimate conclusion, and they end up completely misapplying Torah. And the reason why I think that this is relevant to Yesod ShebeNetzach is that unfortunately we see this a lot, in the world of contemporary halacha, and it's one of the things that we daven for every single day. Hashiva shotenu kavrishona v'yotzenu kavatchila v'haser mimenu yagon v'anacha. We say, remove from us this agony, this anguish that we're going through, that we don't have a Sanhedrin Agadol, we don't have a Supreme Court system that's able to suspend us and root us in the proper inyanim. And the reason for that is because halacha has become entirely disintegrated. It's so rare to find, and that's why it's so pleasurable when you do find a display of halacha that goes from inception all the way to application, where you see the direct channel from the word of Hashem until the way that you're going to act in the 21st century. And you see how there's a consistency. You see principle. You see idea. You see development. You see application. You see rabbis working together. You see harmony. When you don't have that, you have a complete disintegration of the Netzach of Torah. And it's an unbelievably tragic thing. And this is why, by the way, and it's kind of a shtickle been whitewashed out of history, but in the generations that immediately followed the authoring of the Shulchan Aruch, there was a fair amount of backlash from Rabbanim at that time, where you have many, the Maharsha, the Baal Tosfos Yontif, the Maharam, major Achronim, who are coming out with, wielding swords and axes against the Shulchan Aruch for destroying the entire structure of halacha. As the Maharsha's language is in Sota, he brings it in on the Gemara that I just mentioned. He says, "Uvadoros halalu," the people who are morim halacha bitocha shulchan aruch, harei hem enum yodim tama inyan shakol davar. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know the reasons why they're doing what they're doing. So he says,
the Shulchan Aruch says it himself.
The Shulchan Aruch says it itself, right? It's explicit in the introduction.
Don't read my book.
He says, I'm giving you a quick review book every 30 days. You just chazer through the Shulchan Aruch and you get a quick reminder of all the things. He's not trying to teach you the Tam, and anyone who reads the Shulchan Aruch knows that he's not teaching you the Tam. I once had this conversation with somebody who told me he was learning in Halacha Kollel for a number of years. And I said, that's great. So how do you guys learn Halacha? He said, well, we start with the Shulchan Aruch and we work our way to contemporary Shilas and Shuvas. I said, wait, you start from the Shulchan Aruch? He's like, yeah, what do you mean? Like that's the basis of Halacha. I literally laughed at him. I said, first of all, how can you learn the Shulchan Aruch without learning the Rambam? When 75% of it is literally copied out of the Rambam. And then how do you learn the Rambam without the Gemara? I mean, it's childish to assume that you could learn the Shulchan Aruch and seriously and realistically come to an understanding of what halacha is actually calling upon you to be involved in. There was some very strong language that was used by the Tosfos Yontif, where he writes, he says he wrote this book, the Beis Yosef wrote this book called Shulchan Aruch, and he based it on the language of the Rambam, and he says explicitly, Lo niskaven lahoros mitoch sifro. He didn't intend for people to be paskening out of his book. Chalila v'chalila milachshov alav kazos. God forbid anyone should even consider paskening from the Shulchan Aruch. What are you doing? Rak misha lamad ve'ayin b'sefer haturim in Parish Beis Yosef. Only someone who studied the Torah with the Beis Yosef. V'yil'ah limtzo tachlis kol din v'din. And he put in effort and exhausted himself to find the purpose of each and every judgment. Only that person, halo yadu v'yavinu mitoch hashulchan aruch, then you'll be able to see those conclusions and those purposes hinted at within the Shulchan Aruch. But it's not meant to be there on the surface. I mean, I'm holding back the harshest language, which is the language of the Maharam, where he just says, like, literally, I don't even want to look at these books. They don't have. He says, Ein midarki lahamid shum yesodu binyan shel psak din shel svarim ke'ilu. I don't even want to base a single halacha that I ever say on a word that's brought in there. He says it's completely not understandable. Rabim nichshalim b'divreihem lahater es ha'isur v'lehesor es et ha'mutar. The entire system has gone to pop as a result of this. Now again, Rav Yosef knew what he was doing. It's the fools who approach his book without the understanding. That's why I always strongly encourage people to read the introduction to a sefer, to a book, to anything that you're reading. I mean, for God's sake, the author wrote it as an intro for the book. You don't think that he put some important guidelines into the introduction? It's fools that read books. Anyway, B'kitzer, just to wrap it all together, I think that Yesod ShebeNetzach demands of us full integrity to the battle and to the values that we are taking upon, and in allowing ourselves not to confuse ourselves for the values that we are representing and embodying, but to view ourselves as a channel, as an opportunity to funnel forth those values and ideals that we stand for on part for Hashem, standing in the Tzva Hashem, and recognize that even though we can never slack off, Lo ata ben chorin libatel mimena, and the obligation is 100% on our shoulders, if we are involved in the battle for Netzach with integrity and with truth, we're involved for emes b'pnei shehu emes. And if we do that, we ultimately become HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Har Sinai, and we allow the presence of Hashem that B'chol Yom V'Yom echoes out from Har Chorev, we allow ourselves to be the echoing force of Hashem's voice in the world, and allow ourselves to really be the authors not only of our own lives, but ultimately of how the Torah is manifest in this world. So these are some ideas for Yesod ShebeNetzach. Thanks again, everyone took the time to join. It's always appreciated, and have a wonderful night.